Hey y'all, welcome back to our weekly video series. I'm Peyton and I am joined by the ladies Corey and Yaila. And today we have such a fun topic to chat about. We are going to be talking about some of the myths of spiritual awakening. Because as you know, people are waking up in record numbers right now, and there are so many people who are just starting out on their spiritual journey. And at the beginning of your spiritual journey, it can be easy to fall into certain traps or certain misunderstandings. And I know all three of us had learned some things the hard way. And so today we're going to be talking about some of those common things that are easy mistakes to make when you are just starting out on the spiritual path so that you don't have to learn the way that we did. So, Yaila, I would like to start with you. What would you say are some of the myths of spiritual awakening? Those things that people tend to misunderstand, not quite get right, that you see in your students and your clients?
Yeah, I love that we are talking about this topic because there's a lot out there, actually. I think there'll probably more than what we talk about in this video, but some of the common ones that I see, the biggest one is comparison and expectation for our journey to look like what we're seeing for other people. So, for example, I know for myself, when I heard of like a spiritual awakening, I heard of people's stories where they had this really big life-changing event happen, and it was like, they're flooded with all this new energy and their whole perception, everything was completely different. For me, my journey was different. I actually had little, it was almost like bite-sized pieces, I would say, was how my awakening happened. So in the beginning, I didn't realize that I was actually going through the process. That's the biggest one, is comparing our journey to other people's, looking at what our expectations are as far as how it's supposed to look, and assuming that our version is going to be exactly like other people. Because what I find for my students is everybody's energy signature is their own. So their journey is going to be very different from other people's. For learning what your energy, how you're receiving energy, I think is another myth. So for some people, they are more clairvoyant. They actually start to see energy more than what they used to. It's clear seeing. Other people are clairaudient. They start to literally hear messages, whether it's through sounds like thoughts in their own head, or it sounds like other people's voice actually talking to them. Sometimes that opens up for people. They'll hear their guides. And I remember there was a lady whose energy, she had energy classes that I started listening to, and her awakening was, she remembered walking into her living room and hearing her guide say, "Welcome back." And that was the first time she actually heard them. So I was thinking in my mind, it was going to be like that. I was going to hear them just like she did. And that wasn't my journey. Other people, I think many people come into a lot of the classes being strong in their clairsentience, which is clear feeling. We can feel the world around us, and sometimes that can get heightened. So we start to feel extreme energies. We start to feel the changing in the moon or the planets, and it starts to feel really extreme. And we start to assume that these sensations, when they're heightened, when they're starting to open, can kind of become really strong. And I think a myth on that is thinking it's always going to stay in this extreme version where it's kind of hard to function in your day-to-day life. I think that's another myth to it. It does get easier because your body starts to calibrate and match, taking in the energy, sensing the energy, and you learn how to process it in more efficient ways, versus the first time when you start doing it, it's going to feel pretty rough. Or clear cognizance. I think that's the biggest one too. Clear knowing. Sometimes discerning that just clear knowing can be a big journey. And so I think a myth around that is assuming that you are wrong or that it's not correct, but you're getting this information that you never used to have before. So I think some of the bigger myths that I notice with my clients is they're assuming their journey is supposed to look like other people's. They assume they're getting it wrong, or they're not doing it right, or they're not good enough to do it. And then the next one is some of these like outside things where you can only be spiritual if you are a vegan, or only vegans are spiritual, or you can't be spiritual and do XYZ, or you have to look a certain way, or speak a certain way. There's a lot of spiritual people I know that use foul language. I know it slips out of my mouth sometimes too. So, I think the little boxes that people put themselves and other people in when it comes to what spiritual is or what it's allowed to be, I think are some of the biggest ones. But that's where I'll start. How about for you, Corey?
Oh, I love that you have to be vegan or you have to speak a certain way, look a certain way. I love that. One of the myths that was very familiar to me and also to a lot of my clients and some of my students is that the spiritual journey or spiritual awakening is this place of just absolute bliss. It's like this, I've arrived. It's like, oh, and that's certainly, you have moments like that, absolutely, but you don't go from A to Z without B, C, D, E, F, and so on. So one of the myths of, as soon as you start along that journey, that everything is going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be so magical. And there are certainly those moments, but it takes work because, tuning into your clairvoyance or psychic or being a medium or a channel like Peyton, it takes a lot of practice. And that's another myth. It takes a lot of practice and time to develop that muscle and the many muscles that we have on the spiritual journey to get where you want to be. And another myth is when somebody wants to be a psychic or a channel and going along that journey and realizing that if they're not, like Yaila said, if you're not seeing things or feeling things or knowing whatever it is, like the other person, that you're not doing it right or you're not good enough, because everybody's different. Everybody gets their messages differently. And I know for me, I always get my messages differently. It's not the same way every time. And so having that, this is what I want to be, and then going on the journey and not being open-minded enough to be open to the discovery of, well, maybe that's what is going to happen. Or maybe I might end up in a different area of my life or the spiritual journey. So that is another myth. And the myth that, you putting the time in to develop that muscle. You don't just get there. Some people, yes, are born that way, but then there's the journey of having to learn how to manage it. Because when you're born with that natural, well, we are all born with that natural ability. But when you are born with it in that sense, it's hard. A lot of psychic mediums that see dead people from the time that they were young, it can be very scary at first, and they shut it off. But when they find somebody that can help them have the boundaries for the departed ones that come to them and those sort of things, it takes time. It really takes time. That's a big myth. Just don't get from A to Z without B, C, D, E, and F. What have you got, Peyton?
You girls are so brilliant. I wish I knew all of these things like 10 years ago. It would have sped up my journey so much quicker. I guess the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about myths of spiritual awakening is the biggest mistake I made on my journey. And it was a misunderstanding, but it caused me so much grief. And that is one of the first things I was taught was never to think about anything negative because you're going to manifest it. I was actually taught that by one of my earliest teachers. And I really took it to heart. And so anytime, a negative emotion came up or something negative or unwanted happened in my life, I was so afraid I was going to manifest it if I focused on it that I completely repressed it. And so I would just be stuffing anything painful down. And because I didn't want to make it worse, I didn't want to manifest more of this terrible thing. And that is the absolute worst thing you can possibly do. So the number one myth for me is that, as you said, Yaila, to be spiritual, you have to be thinking love and light all the time, only giving your attention to what is positive, is a huge myth in the spiritual community, because the biggest part of your spiritual work is healing those things that are unpleasant, and you can't heal them until you look at them. So for me, that was something that simple misunderstanding caused me so much heartache, because as you know, as you stuff all that painful stuff down, it's just going to explode one day, and it just wasn't pretty. So this is something that bit me so hard, that I try to help all my clients understand that, yes, you want to be positive and loving and move in that direction. But a big part of this process is being able to look at what we talked about in our shadow work video, which is your own dark side, because that's part of this journey. So for me, that is always the number one thing, because I know how badly it misfired in my life, not understanding that point. Now, it's another thing that I see a lot of times in especially my newer clients, which is a misunderstanding, or what I would call another myth. And that is, once you're awakened, especially if you consider yourself to be a light worker or a starseed, you think it's your job to wake up other people by any means necessary. So there is such a temptation to talk nonstop about everything you've learned to everyone in your life, whether they want to hear about it or not. And so it's very easy, because you're so excited for what you're learning, your new skills that you're learning, that you want to shove this down everyone's throat and make them as excited as you are. And as my guides always come in to say, it is our job to be a lighthouse, to shine our light and let other people come to us, because people can't hear you if they're not ready. And so a lot of times what I see is when you try to force, especially I see this with clients and their family members who may still be asleep, they try to force their friends and family members to come along with them, dragging them by the hair. And that puts anybody into resistance, because none of us want to be told what to think, what to believe, or to be made to feel like what we believe is wrong. And so when we try to force ourselves, even if it's coming from, that perspective of excitement, can really backfire on us. So I always encourage people to share this information when you're asked, but don't beat people over the head with it, because they're just not going to hear you. So let them come to you. So that's the second myth that I see happen a lot, is thinking that it's our job to wake other people up. And another thing, and Corey kind of touched on this, it's very tempting to think that your spiritual awakening is a one and done kind of deal. Like, you're awake, now you're done. And this is so not the case. Spiritual awakening is a lifetime process, and we never finish. And so I always encourage people to think about it as a spiral, or as we like to say in the energy world, it's like an onion. You just move through the deepest, darkest stuff first, but it's going to come back up. So if you just know to expect that your healing is not a one-time thing, you've healed it and poof, it's magically gone, you'll handle it a lot more easily when the other layers of that issue come up. Because most of our traumas, most of the things that really bog us down, it's going to take a little time to work through them. And so it's not going to be something that just goes away the first time you learn a new healing process, or, do this healing or go to this healer. So know that it, like Corey said, it's a process. And then the final thing is just to really wrap your brain around the fact that the spiritual path, the spiritual process, being a light worker or a starseed is not all butterflies and unicorns. This is hard work. This may be the hardest thing you have ever done. This is harder for me than law school, the bar exam, in terms of just sheer what it requires out of you to really commit to this path, because you may be the only one in your family, your circle, who is doing this. So it can cause you to feel very alone. And so just knowing that it's not supposed to be all fun and games, that this is tough, you have to be willing to look at your vulnerability and to be willing to let go of things that aren't in alignment with you. And that's something people are finding out right now, and it's so painful. So as Corey said, this is a process and there's no shortcut to it. You just have to keep going and know that as long as you are doing your healing work and moving toward what feels authentic to you, you're doing just fine, no matter how that looks. It might look different than anyone else. So those are the things that to me would have saved me a lot of heartache if I had known them 10 years ago. But, you know, there's always someone that is coming along behind you that you can help on this process. So I think those are the things that I would share with people who are coming along behind me. So anything else, girls, that come to mind with this topic? Anything else you see your clients struggling with in particular?
I think what I always catch myself saying to clients, and just to piggyback on what you're saying, Peyton, is you're never done. This work is for everybody if you choose it. I used to think that the spiritual awakening was just for some people. It's really our conscious choice. You know, it's our soul's choice if we want to move into that direction or not. And so we all have the capability of doing it. I thought, you know, before I started doing this work, that some people are just born special, and I wasn't one of those people. So this is actually for anyone. It's just about doing the work. And the second biggest thing is I'm always putting myself in check. I'm always looking at, am I showing up in integrity? And that's been a big one, because I think when you're on the spiritual path and spiritual awakening, you do move through these hurdles. And I've seen it happen, you know, throughout my training, where we do have that moment like, oh yeah, I moved past that. And then you don't think it's going to come back again. And I had students say, I thought I cleared this. And it's like, well, you did, but there's more. Or some people get to this place of, you know, now they don't have to do the work. Your work is never done. So once you kind of learn the tools, it is an everyday practice. It's just like taking a shower. You know, once you learn how to take a shower by yourself, you don't stop there. You keep practicing, you keep doing it to keep yourself fresh. So I would say that too with your spiritual awakening, as you learn to, however the energy work looks like for you, staying in your practice, you're never done. There's always layers. It does get easier. It will feel lonely at first. It may not, it's probably not going to look anything like you're expecting. It's probably going to show up completely different, but it's going to be better. So that's what I would add to that.
I love that. It's definitely a habit. You have to commit to it for the long haul. And I find there's always the next level. There's always someone, no matter how experienced you are, how long you've been doing it, there's always someone who knows more. There's always someone for you to learn from. And so I always encourage people not to let ego tell us, oh, we know everything now, because our ego wants to come in and be like, oh, well, I already took the class, so, you know, I know everything there is to know. And anytime I start to have that feeling like, okay, I've mastered something, the universe turns my whole world upside down. So it is being humble and realizing that you're never done. There's always the next level. So how about you, Corey? Any last words of wisdom?
No, that's really, I don't really have anything else to contribute to that. You ladies have done a fantastic job. As always.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us on these videos. We are so grateful for you. And don't forget to reach out to us anytime. We are going to link our contact information at the bottom of the screen. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like, save, comment. We love hearing back from you guys. And we'll see you on the next video. Have a great day. Bye.